Good morning, DZRJ, 8:10 a.m. The Voice of the Philippines proudly presents Piracy Watch with attorney Sarah Jane Sugitan, exploring the concepts of intellectual property rights and protection, teaching you how to protect what you create. And now, here's your host, Sarah Jane Sugitan.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Piracy Watch, where we bring you the latest issues on intellectual property. This morning, we have some good news from the Philippine Intellectual Property Office declaring that the Philippines has retained its status in the Piracy Watch list. The watch list is a list that is prepared by the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, wherein the efforts of the Philippine government are reviewed with regards to piracy. Online is the Deputy Director General of the Philippine Intellectual Property Office, Attorney Alan B. Hepty, to talk to us about this very good news. Good morning, Attorney Alan.
Yes, Sarah. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I've heard this is very good news that the Philippines has been retained in the Piracy Watch list by the U.S. Trade Representative.
Well, it is a good news because number one, our country was not downgraded to priority watch list. We have maintained our watch list status because, as you will note, last year we were placed under watch list, but subject to out-of-cycle review.
Okay,
so under the OCR, it is a status quo. So still, we are in the watch list.
Okay, so being in the watch list also requires the U.S. Trade Representative to review the government's efforts in curbing piracy in the country. Is that right, Attorney Alan?
Yes.
Okay, so now that we have retained the status quo, we recognize the efforts, of course, of the Philippine Intellectual Property Office in pioneering that status quo. But we also aim to remove the country, from the watch list. Is that a correct aim of the Philippine Intellectual Property Office?
Well, of course, ultimately, the objective is for us to be taken out of the watch list because, the rating being made by USTR insofar as the protection and enforcement of intellectual property rights is concerned has verified that insofar as our trade relations with the U.S. is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Because being in the priority watch list has some international trade repercussion, particularly for our goods and products enjoying certain preferences in the U.S.
Preferences meaning we refer to tariff preferences in terms of exports?
Actually, I'm referring to the GSP
Okay.
because the general system of preferences provides certain goods coming from the Philippines duty-free. So if we will be placed under the priority watch list, then these benefits will, of course, be forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it is important for us to strive hard and, of course, eventually get out of that watch list.
Mm-hmm. Just to recap, the headline of the press release that the IP office has released is Philippines not downgraded in the watch list. So, by downgrading, you mean you go up higher in the priority list of countries that the USTR monitors?
Well, if you will be downgraded, then you will be put on a priority watch list.
So you go up
Yes.
their priority watch list. So there's a reverse.
Priority watch list is the bad news.
Okay, so being upgraded in the watch list is bad news because it means they'll watch you more closely with regards to copyright. And this involves not just the copyright infringement and piracy efforts that the IP office has implemented. This also covers trademarks, for example, and patents as well.
Actually, it covers protection of intellectual property rights. So it includes trademarks, copyrights, utility models, all other IP assets.
So the entire, all forms of intellectual property is covered in this review. It was also mentioned here that there were efforts by other groups in order for the Philippines to be upgraded in the Philippine watch list. But however, they were unsuccessful, and the Philippine Intellectual Property Office has implemented a holistic approach for 2010, for the entire 2010. So can you tell us more about this holistic approach in order for you to retain the status quo in the watch list, not the entire removal of the Philippines?
Well, Sarah, you were right. No, there were really groups who were lobbying that the Philippines be downgraded to priority watch list.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, not only that they were exerting efforts that we put to priority watch list, but they were even, resorting to some sort of a media campaign. So to speak, to
Mm-hmm.
maybe to condition some entities that the Philippines be downgraded. But as I've said, it is a good news that they were not successful. But just the same, we still have to continue our efforts to fight and combat counterfeiting and piracy in the country. And last year, IPO Philippines has launched its holistic approach to curb counterfeiting and piracy.
Mm-hmm. This holistic approach means what exactly in terms of strategy? I mean, what does it include aside from the usual? We see the ceremonial burning of fake DVDs and other fake intellectual property. Aside from the usual confiscation and destruction of this fake and counterfeit products, what else is included in this? What else is new in this holistic approach, Attorney Allen?
Okay. Well, right now, Sarah, when it comes to the enforcement of intellectual property rights, actually, there are a lot of law enforcement agencies involved in the enforcement operations. We have the NBI, we have the PNP, we have the OMB, and of course, other law enforcement agencies.
Mm.
Last June 2005, there was this executive order issued creating the National Committee on Intellectual Property Rights, and IPO Director General sits as the vice chair of that national committee.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the situation is that while IPO is taking the lead in ensuring enforcement of IPR, the fact remains that we don't have enforcement mandate.
So
we
the
have to
IPO
be-
has
yeah,
no
we
police
have no
powers.
enforcement mandate.
We're
So
not.
we have
Yes.
to be creative in our approach so that we'll be, I would say, quite successful in enforcing IPR. So basically, when we talk of holistic approach, we are not just focusing, running after pirates and counterfeiters with respect to violations of the IP code. There are other laws applicable in the country that we can resort to stop the proliferation of these counterfeits and pirated items.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, just to give you an overview of what is this holistic approach, there are several measures that we would like to implement. Number one is that one main source of counterfeits and pirated products are actually, of course, either through importation or through smuggling. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to importation and smuggling, we have to work with the Bureau of Customs on that. And the Bureau of Customs has also its own IPR division. And presently, IPO Philippines was able to coordinate with them. In fact, we were given some sort of a deputization in the sense that if there are intelligence informations regarding importation of counterfeit and pirated items, we can work with the Bureau of Customs on that.
Mm-hmm.
With respect to OMB, the Optical Media Board, IPO Philippines was also designated as deputized agents of OMB. So in effect, we can exercise visitorial and inspection powers insofar as optical media products are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the usual process of applying for a search warrant, we have to, of course, continue that. Our PNP, our NBI personnel will have to continue conducting intelligence information. If they have to make some test buy on suspected counterfeit items, then the same will be done also. And one notable, of course, innovation that we have adopted so far as enforcement of IPR is concerned is that we took note of the fact that some of these counterfeit items are being sold in the malls or in
Yes.
some big stores.
Mm-hmm.
So since USTR is very particular in the enforcement of IPR, then our Director General has made some arrangement with them that if they are really serious in this campaign, so perhaps not only that the IPR violators be prosecuted for violation of IP code, but maybe these small owners who tolerate and who violates the IP code itself must have their US visa also cancelled.
Yes.
So that's one, of course, measure.
Yes, it's a very good measure, and in fact, I have here in the studio Mr. Harry Tambuatco, who's an advocate of that. You don't really have to go after the small fish. You also go for the lessors, di po ba? The landlords who allow pirated wares to be sold in their premises. So we also have to impose some sort of responsibility upon them in order to implement respect for intellectual property rights.
Yes, yes.
So, what other aspects? How about if it's holistic? Did we involve private sector in?
Yes, yes. In addition to what I have mentioned, we are also working with the Department of Trade and Industry for the cancellation of the business registration and business permits of these store owners who are violating intellectual property rights. And when it comes to corporation or corporate entities, then we have to work with the Securities and Exchange Commission.
I see.
Also, the role of the local government units here is very important because before you can, of course, establish a business or operate your store, for example, you have to secure the necessary mayor's permit.
Yes.
So in that sense, we will coordinate with mayors, the local government units, so that the mayor's permit of these store owners will also be cancelled.
Yeah, will be canceled.
Yes,
Ayan. Thank you, Attorney Alan B. Hefty, joining us this morning to discuss the Philippine status in the U.S. Trade Representative's Piracy Watch List. We laud your efforts, Attorney Alan, and we hope that the Intellectual Property Office will continue to blaze trails in promoting respect for intellectual property in our country. Thank you very much, Attorney Alan, for joining us this morning.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Ayan, nadinig niyo po ang very good news. The Intellectual Property Office headed the National Committee on Intellectual Property Rights, which has been in force since 2005 and has since then worked with other agencies. So this is an interagency effort, not just by the IPO, but also involving the Optical Media Board, the Customs, as Attorney Alan B. Hefty mentioned, and also the private sector, including the brand owners and the cooperation of the mayors in ensuring that we don't just go after the sellers of these pirated DVDs, these fake bags, but we also go after those who allow these people to locate in the malls. So, yan po yung may chain of command. Their responsibility is spread out among all the players in order to ensure that we promote respect for intellectual property. Not just of foreign brands, but also of Filipino brands. Kasi meron na rin pong, there are also instances that Filipino brands are being pirated and counterfeited, and that's definitely unfair to those who have first created that brand. Definitely, intellectual property rights is in the interest of the country, especially since, as Attorney Alan B. Hefty mentioned, the U.S. Trade Representative imposes sanctions on the general system of preferences when it comes to Filipino products being made available to the U.S. market. So this has implications as well, and it is indeed good news that we are not downgraded. Medyo reverse po yung ibig sabihin. When the U.S. watch list says that we are downgraded, it means we go up higher their watch list, diba? They monitor us more closely. But if they drop us from the watch list, so slowly until we are totally removed from the watch list, it means it's a promotion of the country's status in enforcing intellectual property. Okay, so joining me this morning in the studio is Mr. Harry Tambuatco also in order to discuss further the private sectors.
Morning,
I forgot to turn on your mic. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yes, to discuss further, of course, kasi holistic approach yung pinopromote ng IPO. We need not, aside from the government stand, which is what Attorney Alan B. Hefty talked about, let's also get the considerations of the Filipino brands, because meron din po feedback that are we just protecting foreign brands? Diba? So, when it comes to intellectual property, open market access and all that, we also aim for the Filipino brands being protected and promoted abroad. So, those are the considerations.
You know, Attorney, it's interesting. When we are downgraded or we maintain the status quo, ang maganda dyan, we are looked upon not too much as pirates. So we tend to look good. What struck me with your interview with Attorney Hefty, no? He's a Deputy Director General of Intellectual Property. He's saying that there are some groups or corporations who are actively, with intent, lobby against this position or the disposition of the Philippine position in the watch list. So, I don't understand. Pag sinabi mo may naglalabi against them, worse, using media. So, these guys are saboteurs. They're terrorists of consumerism. Ang gusto nila mangyari,